Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadies.
37 members of Congress have asked Joe Biden to issue mass marijuana pardons. Altria, one of the world's biggest tobacco companies, is now well on its way to being also one of the world's biggest and most influential cannabis companies. And our buddy Jay has found a weed vacation spot up in Maine that I'm really curious to hear about. We gotta go.
We're going, dude. We're going.
We've got that and a whole lot more. Now, this episode of Vote Pro Podcast is sponsored by the folks at CBD. That's spelled SEABEDEE. And they are providers of premium CBD wellness products. Now, CBD products have been featured in High Times, Forbes, Thrillist, and other publications for meeting the highest standards of quality in the industry. Feel better, sleep better, recover faster with CBD oils, edibles, topicals, skincare, and guess what, Jay? Even pet products. Woo! Yeah. Check them out at cbd.org, or you can contact them at relief@cbd.org, or call 866-304-5974. And as always, we will include all this information in our show description. Ain't that right, Jay?
That's it. And they get a discount, right?
Well, you know, that's true. They get a discount. You receive 50% off when you use the promo code POTCAST50. All one word. POTCAST 50.
Man, you're like an elementary school teacher.
Well, you know, it's easy to get wrong.
Like we have some dumb listeners or something.
Well, no, we just want to make sure they get everything that's coming to them.
50%?
50%, man.
What's going on this week?
Well, I wanted to start. You had a story about an ex-Trump advisor, Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
What does he have to say about the cannabis world?
You know, Steve Bannon's one of those guys, you either love him or hate him. I mean, he's a larger than life figure, I think you fair to say. Ganjapreneur, a guy named Graham Abbott, writing for Ganjapreneur, had this article out the other day. And, you know, Steve Bannon has a think tank, a conservative think tank. And they've just released a report titled, quote, Cannabis Cronyism, unquote. And it alleges some profound political corruption in the cannabis space. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about political corruption in the cannabis state lately, which I don't know. We're not trying to say that there's more than other industries. It just so happens we've covered that a lot lately. So,
but this is the industry we cover. So,
So what are you going to do? Right. His organization is called the Government Accountability Institute, GAI. And they just issued this report, like I said, Cannabis Cronyism, and it highlights the roles of certain political leaders, including former Republican Speaker of the House John Boehner, who we've covered, who he got out of the Congress and went right into weed. New York's Democrat,
which has to tell you something about Congress.
We'll tell you something right there. Yeah, and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's in a raft of shit right now, too, anyway.
Right.
And it has to do with the rollout of the legal cannabis industry. He purporting itself to be a watchdog entity of the political corruption. The GAI's report also appears to suggest that the cannabis industry was not declared essential during the coronavirus pandemic so as to guarantee patients, access to their medicine, not so much for that reason as to line the pockets of politicians. That's one of the claims they make. Yeah, right. So here's a quote. Here's a small quote from the report. While some claim that cannabis dispensaries are truly as important as pharmacies, which also remained open during statewide lockdown, other factors may have contributed to this decision. Whatever its medical and recreational benefits, cannabis has evolved into a nearly $21 billion industry that lobbies, pressures, and rewards politicians who look out for it. Now, that's an excerpt from the report. The report's relatively long, and we're not going to read the whole thing here, but specifically, the report focuses on 7 states, all with legalized cannabis: California, New York, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Missouri, and Washington. and it seeks to highlight instances where officials were either lobbied by cannabis interests or allegedly favored friends and or family for cannabis business licenses. Many high-profile politicians, including, as we mentioned earlier, Governor Cuomo, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who's a Democrat, Florida Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan are named in their report. Now, Larry seems like a pretty straight shooter.
Oh, come on.
He's a politician.
He's a politician. Yeah. I'm sure he's a very nice politician, but he's a politician.
So I think this is interesting. I haven't seen much press on it, so I don't think the press gives a lot of deference to our friend Mr. Bannon anyway.
No.
You may remember that, he's under investigation, I think, by the FBI now, isn't he, for some other stuff?
Oh, yeah. They're all
He was arrested. And, yeah. So the report also pulls from criminal investigations by the FBI related to legal cannabis industries in California. Shocker. Missouri, Florida, and New York. So we'll keep an eye on that.
I'm sure a lot of these governors, what's our friend's name over in California?
Newsom?
Gavin Newsom, right? I'm sure he's a nice guy. He seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, he seems like a guy.
Larry Hogan's a nice guy. It just reminds me of an old friend of mine, a woman from Russia named Nastasia, Naz we called her. And she used to say, you men, you are all dogs. It is true. And I'm like, no, it's true. You are all dogs. Some of you are nice dogs, but you're all dogs. And that's what I think of. I think of politicians. They're nice ones. Some of them are but they're all politicians, and they all, play the game.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the game begins with the government getting its nose into the free market. And from there, you set up regulations. You make the regulations so that only the biggest and richest players can conform to them, and everybody else gets crushed. And in the meantime, there are payoffs and graft and the whole thing. That's the formula. It's age old, and it's always worked.
Well, we don't want to turn this into a political show. It isn't, but we concentrate on cannabis, so we want to keep it there. So I don't want to get too far off the rails, but let's just look at, in general, if you look at just Congress, House and Senate, they're all millionaires. And there's a pretty good percentage of them that weren't millionaires when they got the job.
Do you think?
And they're not making that much money. In the scheme of things in D.C., a couple $100,000 a year or less, what is they make? 178 or something they make. That sounds like great money to a lot of people, but in D.C., that's not great money.
But you don't become a multi-millionaire off of that.
That's right. And there's reasons for that. So anyway, no need to dwell on the sliminess of politicians. We're here in Ground Zero. We're broadcasting from Washington, D.C., so we know of what we speak.
Send us your thoughts at VoteProPot.com/contact or send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com, and please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to be part of the show, call our message line at 240-257-2441.
Speaking of Congress, this is an interesting thing, and, they've been known to do some good things from time to time.
What? I missed that story.
Yes, even congressmen of both parties. A group of Washington lawmakers, what we would call congressmen, they've sent a letter to Joe Biden. And what they want Biden to do is grant mass clemency for cannabis offenders.
I love this.
This is great. Now, the letter is signed by 37 members of Congress. And they want this. This is a pretty rare, but not completely unprecedented step to issue a general pardon. Now, they did that. I think Jimmy Carter or Gerald Ford or someone might have done that back in the 70s with Vietnam draft dodgers, just issued a broad general pardon. They want a general pardon for all former federal nonviolent cannabis offenders. Now, this letter was sent. It was led by, and this is kind of a mouthful, Congressional Cannabis Caucus co-chairs.
Wow, you got the first time.
Say well that done. 10 times fast.
You're the pro here. That's
Barbara Lee of California and Earl Blumenauer of Oregon, and listeners to Vote Pro Podcast have heard those names over and over.
Yep, absolutely.
These are the lawmakers. They're on the front line of the legalization effort, and they in their letter, they have pointed to the recent wave of state legalizations, as well as the recent, congressional actions, the MORE Act, the Safe Banking Act, all of these aimed at ending the federal prohibition. Mm-hmm. And now they're saying that until such a bill is sent to the president's desk, and one will be forthcoming, I believe, that these 37 signatories are calling on Biden to, and here's the quote, lead on criminal justice reform and provide immediate relief to thousands of Americans. Now, this is an opportunity for Biden.
It is indeed.
To because now he opposes adult use legalization. He's on record at least. But he has voiced support in the past for things like expunging prior convictions, decriminalization. So he's not...
he's on the record favoring it.
On the record favoring it. So, and of course, as predicted, this has turned very much into a criminal justice reform issue, as well it should, because, people are sitting in jail for things that are widely legal now in other states, and it's
silly.
It's just not fair.
It's not fair.
It's just not fair.
Bottom line.
It's not American. There's so many ways I could describe it, but so Joe, read the letter or have one of your aides read it to you. If I were president, I wouldn't be sitting reading a bunch of stuff. I'd have people read it to me. But then you got to trust the people who are reading it to you that they're not putting their own stuff in there.
Is this something he could do in an executive order? God knows he's gotten pretty good at that.
Well, it's a pardon. Yeah.
So
right. The president can pardon anyone at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. All he has to do is wave the wand, sign the paper, and it is done. He doesn't need anyone's permission. That's one of the main powers of a presidency that nobody could do anything about.
Yeah, right.
He can do it tomorrow. He can do it today.
Has he commented or his staff commented on this yet?
Not according to the latest reports, but we will keep watch and we will let you know how this pans out, because I think it's something that he could do, as they say, with a stroke of the pen.
So, you want to hear some business news?
I always want to hear some business news.
Ultra, you familiar with them?
Yeah.
Okay, they're one of the world's largest tobacco companies.
They're into all kinds of things, but
they're into all kinds of stuff. Right. Well, I mean, so their brands are like Marlboro and Copenhagen and Skoal and Black and Mild. They also own St. Michael Wine Estates, which I didn't realize, which is one of the top wine producers in the world. Right. And Philip Morris Capital Corporation. So anyway, they're huge. They're huge in the tobacco space. Well, they spent this is Altria. They spent $1.8 billion in December of 2018 for a 45% stake in Cronos Group, which is, a major cannabis firm out of Canada. And they're now apparently applying pressure in the halls of Congress at the state level, as well as the federal level, to push cannabis-friendly laws, according to recent filings. So the question here is, we've talked about this in the past. We've talked about, is big U.S. tobacco primarily going to get into cannabis? And they are.
It seems like they are, yeah. Seems like the answer is yes.
So what does that mean? It means a couple things to me. They've read the tea leaves or the tobacco leaves.
Hot leaves.
Right. And they, they're pretty comfortable that this is going to be a thing and is going to be a hundreds of billions of dollar industry.
Yep.
Right? If they're investing this kind of money and this kind of political clout,
right,
they've quietly added cannabis technology as well to their portfolio, including like patented vaporizers for smoking pot and other applications, proprietary applications for ingesting cannabis in different ways.
Right.
And in a sign of both the maturation of cannabis as a serious business and in a clear indication of how the cannabis industry is using the same tactics employed by Silicon Valley, alcohol, and other big business sectors to secure favorable regulation, Altria is also covering its bases politically at both the state and federal level. Recently, they hired a Denver-based, they're actually a law firm, but they do a lot of lobbying, Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck. Very, very successful, very large.
Yeah, that name does ring a bell, actually.
Yeah, and I had heard of them before. And they are the top cannabis and hemp law firm in the country. So they've hired them. They're doing a lot of lobbying. They're pushing for a lot of laws. They shelled out $50,000 to 2 lobbyists from Atkin, Gump, Strauss, Hauer, and Feld, another lobbying firm that's very active in cannabis policy. The point of all this being, they are spending money and acquiring companies in the cannabis sector. I mean, let's face it. I think in a lot of ways, tobacco is a dying industry. I mean, it's certainly smaller than...
I would say receding. I don't know if it's dying. I don't know if it's ever going to die. There's always going to be people who enjoy tobacco, but it's not what it was.
Yeah,
and
I suppose you're right.
It's receding.
Well, the way that Forbes, this is an article out of Forbes, by the way, and this is by Chris Roberts. And the way he concludes this article, he says, several bills that would reschedule cannabis and allow for federal sales. Only in the House has cannabis reform come up for a vote and passed, obviously.
Right. The more
efforts in the Senate have been blocked. But under Schumer, it seems likely that Senate will vote eventually on cannabis reform. And with Altria, big tobacco is now big marijuana. And they're poised to with a seat at the table, both from a business standpoint and from a political influence standpoint.
And I think that's right. And it signals to me that they believe that this is going to happen soon.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's
to be investing
this year.
You know, very soon.
And so I don't know what your thoughts on this are, Jay, but I see this as a good thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because this, you know, reinforces 2 of the main things for a healthy economy: choice and competition. You know, they're going to be getting into all kinds of products, different lines of products, and the consumer's going to have a lot more choices. And choices and competition, and that's what keeps prices down. So
I agree. It's a good thing, but I'd like to hear from our listeners, because I think we have a lot of folks in the cannabis industry, and a lot of them are mom and pop, startups, smaller companies. And I'd like to see how they feel about this, because a lot of them are complaining and, at least cautiously worried about the possibility of a huge behemoth of a company coming in and sort of taking over sectors, whether it be vaporizers or whether it be over-the-counter, flour and other products.
It's kind of the Walmart syndrome.
The Walmart syndrome. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens, and we'll see what kind of legislation and regulation, especially that Altria kind of pushes for, because again, the problem is that if it's the wrong regulation, and this is something that voters can do something about, that's what squeezes the little guys out, not the competition. It's the regulation.
I think the fear, and there's some legitimacy to it, is when you look at legislation in the past for really big industries, whether it's, banking or, for God's sakes, insurance, healthcare, what happens is when these companies become so huge and have such deep pockets, we go back to the crony capitalism thing again. They basically write the laws.
They write the laws.
They just write them and hand them over to the staffers for congressmen and senators and say, here's what we want you to pass, and they do it.
Right. And this is going to be a kind of mission of ours on VoteProPot-Cast, because, the struggle doesn't end with legalization, because then comes the regulation. And
right.
Getting the regulations that are not unfavorable to the little guys is going to be important.
Yeah,
because without the little guys, it's those little guys that make the difference, and so we're all about that.
I mean, look what's happening with Silicon Valley and these tech companies.
Yeah,
they have so much control now.
Right, and we don't want to see that happen with cannabis. Some local action is going on now. Of course, we've been talking about Virginia, and Virginia is well on its way to passing adult use.
Yeehaw.
But now Maryland House of Delegates is ready to consider an adult use bill.
Great.
This week.
They're competing. Virginia and Maryland are going against each other, so you can get the first legislation, right?
Well, I think Maryland's going to lose that fight.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't have thought that a year ago.
No, me either, man.
But somehow, some way, Virginia started off and went for it, and they are just really a reconciliation hearing and a signature away.
Yeah. And to be clear, I live in Virginia and Phil lives in Maryland, so that's why the discussion took that path.
Right. So, Jay is going to be pointing at me and saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's just fine.
We'll see.
Now, this is House Bill 32. It calls for legalizing possession of up to 4 ounces of cannabis. And I think the Virginia bill is only 1 ounce.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Up to 4 ounces of cannabis and home cultivation for personal use. And I don't believe there's any limits on the number of plants you can have.
Wow. No kidding. That's great if that's right.
But that could all change because
early.
Because there's another. Before that, it also provides for resentencing or releasing those who are serving time for nonviolent cannabis offenses.
Excellent.
And it calls for expunging prior convictions. The expungement and the resentencing or releasing is key. But this is one of 2 legalization bills now at the Maryland General Assembly. The other is in the Senate. It's Senate Bill 708. And they're going to have their hearing in the Senate Finance Committee on March 4th. That bill calls for a legalization of 2 ounces instead of 4 ounces of cannabis. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the main difference, and probably stricter limits on home cultivation.
I would assume, yeah.
But so we'll see how that pans out. But
great.
The race is on. And it's not over till it's over. It looks like Virginia's got the leg up, but Maryland is going to be hot on its heels. We have enjoyed medical for a lot longer, so that's a good thing. So
real medical. We don't have flower here in our medical.
Right. But go Maryland.
Yeah, man.
But it's not just Maryland, Jay.
No.
DC is also looking at some movement. Now, you recall, this happened way back. In 2014, there was a referendum that legalized adult use in Congress, but you can't buy it.
Right.
And you can't grow it.
Because Congress won't give them the money to set up the program.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. What happened is that the Congress, the next year, or that year is the year that the GOP took control of Congress, and they have been using this kind of obscure budgetary maneuver. They attach a rider to the budget bill that, like you say, prohibits the government, DC, from using any federal dollars to set up adult use sales. But now we've got a more cannabis-friendly Congress in Washington, and which appears ready to jettison that rider. It has to pass each year, and they've passed it each year, so that could be the end of that rider. But at the same time, what had happened before was medical marijuana had been regulated by the DC Health Department. And I don't know what the deal is with the health department, but now it is being regulated by the Alcoholic Beverage Regulatory Agency, the ABRA, which is which regulates a legal industry, the alcohol industry in DC.
In a retail industry.
In a retail industry.
Yeah.
Right. So it's taken out of the hands of the health department and put into the hands of the Alcoholic Beverage Regulatory Board. They've taken measures to up the number of medical patients, and they've eased the regulatory burden on cannabis retailers somewhat. So we could see adult use sales in DC as early as this year.
Wow. Well, I mean, Virginia's looking at like at least 2 years, probably. 2023 is what they're talking about. I don't know about Maryland. So DC is going to beat us both when it comes to adult use. That's right.
Well, DC already did kind of beat us. They passed the referendum, that's true. But it's just the maneuvering that's held it up. So
DC is weird because you can have it, you can possess it, you can share it, but you can't sell it. So people would buy a T-shirt for $300 and as a gift would get an ounce of weed with it or something. You know, they're doing all kinds of weird stuff. So that's just stupid. Just
buy a pencil for $40 and we'll throw in the weed.
Get an eighth. That's just dumb, man. But you're right. You're right. That's what was going on. So, well, good, man. So Virginia, Maryland, D.C., we're all leading the way, bro.
We're cooking, man. We're cooking.
Dude, we were talking, you, me, and Andrew, about taking a little vacation this summer, right? We get through this COVID shit, get our vaccines, and go somewhere. We're talking about the beach,
or maybe fishing or something.
We were talking about Mexico. We're doing something. Well, I got the spot.
All right.
Okay. You ready for this? You ever been to Maine?
Oh yeah, we used to go to Maine all the time.
I love Maine.
When I was a kid, we used to vacation in Maine all the time.
Where'd you go in Maine?
We went to this place called Sebago Lake.
Oh wow, where's that? Is that
a lovely place? It's down Maine. I don't know exactly where.
I mean, is it on near the coast or is it?
No, it's
inland?
not. It's not really near the coast. I don't believe.
Lake, so it's probably inland.
It's inland a little bit, but we used to go. My cousins and some friends of ours lived up on Cape Cod, and we'd go from Cape Cod up to Maine, get some lobster, and go. It's not really a beach kind of a shore.
Yeah, it's a lake, but still. A lot of hiking and nature and whatnot.
Beautiful
I love
state.
That. I love that outdoor stuff. So you a camper? You like to go camping? Or?
Love to go camping.
Yeah. All right. Me too. Well, here we go. This is a spot. I'm looking at an article in a website, WCYY.com. WCYY 94.3 is a radio station up in Maine. And they're talking about this new spot between the tourist hotspots of Naples and Bridgeton.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with either one of those, but there's a 17-acre cannabis-friendly camping resort now, and it's known as Camp Laughing Grass. I love the name. Camp I looked it up online. They got a website. Check it out. They got these cool little cabins. They're all painted different colors, okay? Camp Laughing Grass is an adult-only, I like that part a lot, gateway. If you rent one of their signature cabins, it comes with plenty of modern amenities like a comfy bed, air conditioning, outdoor fire pit, and a sundry of smoking apparatuses. So basically, it's a campground that's set up for folks that want to go, enjoy cannabis without mom and dad and the kids. Oh, they're smoking weed over there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So they got hiking and biking trails and, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, sounds like a lot of fun, man. And I looked it up online, and it's very cool looking. They also have a happy hour you guessed it, at 4:20 every day. Happy, and it sounds like a lot of fun.
Well,
man.
I'm laughing already.
Go online and search Camp Laughing Grass.
Well, folks, we've come to the end of another podcast, and we're so glad to have you with us.
It was a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. We will be back next week. In the meantime, don't forget to check out our folks at cbd.org. Definitely check us out at VoteProPot.com. If you have any thoughts, questions, any information about any of the things we've covered, send us a message. You can send us an email, right, Jay?
Yes, certainly can. And the email address is podcast@VoteProPot.com. And we have a message line, 240-257-2441.
And, of course, as usual, there's so much more that you can learn on our VoteProPot-Cast social media platforms. So when you have the moment and the time and the interest, just check us out at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and do a search for VoteProPot.